As you've learned, divers' bodies will absorb nitrogen due to increased pressure when diving. You've also learned that the amount of nitrogen the body absorbs is dependent on how deep the diver dives and how much time the diver spends underwater. Planning and executing your dives using a dive computer and the SSI dive tables helps you calculate the amount of nitrogen your body will absorb on a dive based on the deepest depth you want to go and how long you want to stay underwater. Dive computers and the dive tables also allow you to make as many repetitive no decompression dives per day as you would like, as long as you stay within their limits and the limits of your dive plan. For a better understanding of dive planning, let's take a closer look at the dive profile and how it relates to the SSI dive tables. The dive profile is a simple diagram used in conjunction with the dive tables to help you plan and log your dive throughout your diving day. SSI dive tables are based on U.S. Navy tables, which were designed to Navy specifications for Navy divers. However, Doppler ultrasound studies, which began in the late 1970s and are ongoing today, show that recreational divers should use the Navy dive tables more conservatively. These suggested Doppler time limits are reflected on the dive tables that you'll be using in this course. The first of these is the No Decompression Limits table, which we call Table 1. It has two functions. First, it shows divers how long they may stay at a certain depth without being affected by decompression sickness. This is done by figuring bottom time and depth. Depth is considered the deepest point reached during the dive. Bottom time is measured from the time you begin your descent to the time you begin your direct descent back to the surface. The far left vertical column of Table 1 shows diving depths in feet and meters, with the next column showing the Doppler no decompression bottom time limits for that depth. For example, the time limit for 60 feet or 18 meters is 50 minutes. Even staying within the limits of these tables or your dive computer cannot guarantee safety. Since every person is physically different, individual absorption rates will vary. Always dive the tables and your computer conservatively and never push the limits. The next function of Table 1 is to assign a group designation depending on how long a diver has been at a depth. Starting at the far left, find the deepest point of your dive. All numbers on the table are designed so that if a depth or time falls between listed numbers, it is rounded up to the next greater number. For instance, if you have been diving at 52 feet, you will read for 60 feet, or 18 meters. Now read across the table to find the time you have spent at this depth. If you have been diving for 36 minutes, you will round up to 40 minutes. Reading down from here, you will find the group designation for the dive. In this case, group designation G, so you are a G diver. The group designation becomes important as your diving day proceeds. Most divers don't make just one dive and stop. After your first dive, a certain amount of nitrogen remains dissolved in your body and will be vented continually from the respiratory system for 12 hours. This residual nitrogen must be taken into account in your repetitive dives. To do this, we use Table 2, the residual nitrogen timetable for repetitive air dives, which we refer to as the surface interval table. During the time you spend between dives, your body is constantly venting off residual nitrogen. Table 2 gives you credit for this time, which is called a surface interval. Realize that dives with a surface interval of under 10 minutes are considered one continuous dive. Surface intervals over 12 hours will constitute a new diving day, with your body having no residual nitrogen. At the top of Table 2, you will notice arrows descending from Table 1, which lead to the group designation. To the left of these letters are windows of time. These represent your surface interval. You are looking for the times in between which your interval lies. Remember that by reading for the next greater numbers, we came up with a reading of 60 feet or 18 meters for 40 minutes. This gave us a group designation of G. Let's assume that after the dive, you spent 1 hour and 30 minutes on the surface. Enter Table 2 at the G repetitive group and read to the left until you find the times in between which your surface interval lies. In this case, between 1 hour 16 minutes and 1 hour 59 minutes. Now, read down the column to the group designation at the bottom. We see here that by spending 1 1/2 hours on the surface, you have lowered your residual nitrogen group from G to E. So what does this mean? Let's say you will be going on a second dive to 40 feet or 12 meters. Your body still has an amount of residual nitrogen, so you will not be able to spend as much time at depth as you could on the first dive. In effect, your body has already spent time underwater before you even start the repetitive dive. This time is referred to as your residual time, or RT. To find the amount of your RT, we turn here to the residual times. Table 3 tells you the amount of time you must assume you've already spent at a given depth. Depths are listed here on the far left of the table. Once again, should a depth fall in between those listed, read for the next greater depth. Read across from your second dive depth of 40 feet or 12 meters to the E column. In the box, you see two numbers. The top number, 49, is the RT, or the residual nitrogen from your previous dive. The bottom number, 81, is the adjusted no decompression limit, or the maximum number of minutes you can spend on your second dive. Since the dive needs to be 81 minutes or less, let's plan your second dive for a conservative 40 minutes. This is called your bottom time. In order to be able to figure our group designation at the end of the second dive, we'll need to add our bottom time of 40 minutes to our residual time of 49 minutes to come up with our total time of 89 minutes. Our total time is the number we use when calculating our group designation. By returning to Table 1, we see that a total time of 89 minutes at 40 feet or 12 meters will necessitate reading for 100 minutes. This gives us a group designation of I. To plan a third dive, we return to Tables 2 and 3 and repeat the process again. By now, it should be very obvious that a reliable timing device and depth gauge are essential tools for every dive. To keep track of bottom time, group designations, and surface intervals, divers use what is called a dive profile. Let's work through another dive using a profile. On the first dive, we are diving to a depth of 58 feet or 17 meters, and will remain there for 28 minutes. The 28 is your bottom time, and since this is the first dive of the day, you have no residual nitrogen, so yours is 0. This leaves a total time of 28 minutes. If you check Table 1, you'll find that we have to read for 60 feet or 18 meters and 30 minutes. This means that after a 3-minute safety stop at 15 feet or 5 meters, we will return to the surface as an F diver. As we relax and eat, we will spend 2 hours and 30 minutes on the surface. By checking Table 2, the surface interval table, we see that this amount of time will lower us to a C diver. On our next dive, we will be diving a wreck located at 50 feet or 15 meters. By checking the repetitive dive depths on Table 3, we see that our RT is 21 minutes, and our adjusted no decompression limit is 49 minutes. This means the time we spend underwater cannot exceed 49 minutes. To be conservative, however, we will plan for a bottom time of 30 minutes. Upon surfacing, we add our bottom time of 30 minutes to our residual time of 21 minutes for a total time of 51 minutes. By checking Table 1, we see that a dive of 50 feet or 15 meters, with a total time of 51 minutes, must be rounded up to 60 minutes. You now have a group designation of H at the end of your second dive. Be aware that the tables take into account the ascent rate in their calculations. Always ascend no faster than 30 feet or 9 meters per minute. Diving computers keep accurate track of your diving parameters. They also advise you of the time to the end of the dive, warn of too rapid ascent rates, will automatically factor in surface intervals, and keep track of your maximum depths and bottom times. Owning and using a computer is highly recommended. However, the use of a computer requires adherence to the manufacturer's recommendations for use. Each computer offers different features and functions. Your local SSI dealer can help you find the right computer for you. Planning must be a part of any successful dive. This begins well before the dive starts when you choose a knowledgeable dive buddy and dive operator. Remember that on a charter boat, the dive leader's word is law concerning the dive parameters. Your safety and enjoyment are his primary concern and responsibility. You will be briefed upon these parameters, which may include the depth of the dive, your minimum air requirement, usually 500 psi or 35 bars, direction and layout of the dive site, entry and exit procedures, and check-in and check-out procedures. Use the information from this briefing to create your own personal dive plan. You and your buddy must decide if you are mentally ready for the dive and if your skill level is adequate for the dive site. If you're uncomfortable with the plan, adjust the dive to a shallower depth or shorter time limit. You should dive at your own level and not feel pressured to dive at the level of the group. If you're diving with a new buddy, you may want to discuss more details about the dive, so you can familiarize yourself with each other's equipment, diving styles, and training methods. Some of the topics you may want to discuss include your equipment configuration, what type of backup and emergency equipment you have, whether you're using a computer, the basic hand signals, and emergency skills such as the preferred method for air-sharing ascents. To be a responsible diver, you'll need to know how to make a dive plan and stick to it. Only you can be responsible for your own safety and enjoyment. It's very important that buddies time their dressing so they're ready at the same time. There's nothing more uncomfortable than waiting around in a wetsuit for your partner to get dressed. The dive leader sets the procedures for entering the water. In a drift dive, where everyone drifts with the current, the entire group will usually enter together. On an anchor dive, buddy teams are usually allowed to enter after they've checked out with the dive leader. Before you enter, do one last visual check of your equipment. Make sure there are no unhooked straps or tangled hoses, and that your air is on. If you'll be using a compass, take a heading so you'll be able to track your general direction. Make sure your buddy is okay and clear of the deck before you enter. Once in the water, do one last check to make sure no equipment was jarred on entry. You may need to swim a distance to reach your descent point. Do this face down with either the second stage or snorkel in your mouth. Remember to swim into the current. Once you're ready, go ahead and descend. Descend at the same rate while facing each other, preferably down a descent line or anchor line. This will allow you to descend at the same pace without drifting from the boat. One buddy may take longer to clear ears or may need an equipment adjustment. Be ready to offer assistance if it's asked for. As you descend, look down and adjust your buoyancy to neutral before reaching the bottom. This will prevent a heavy crash landing and avoid possible damage to the environment. It is possible to become disoriented underwater, so check your direction with the compass before heading off, or note your surroundings for landmarks that can aid you in natural navigation. Stay within the area outlined by the dive leader. If you're diving on a reef, there will usually be a ridge of coral with either sand on both sides or sand on one side and a drop-off on the other. By staying beside the coral or near the drop-off, you'll see the most life, and it'll make it easier for you to navigate. If you begin the dive with the reef on your right side, all you'll need to do is turn around so the reef is on your left side on the way back. Natural navigation techniques such as this will help make it easier to find your way back to the boat. Remember to monitor your information system continually for depth, air pressure, and time. You must be back on the boat with at least 500 psi or 35 bar of air in your cylinder. When you have reached either your minimum air pressure or your time limit, it's time to head back. confirm your direction before heading back. Don't assume you know which way to go. You're not used to this three-dimensional world, and it's possible to confuse directions. Use landmarks and your compass to aid in navigation. If you should become lost, you'll need to surface and check your direction. When you reach the exit point, begin the ascent together. Monitor your ascent rate and maintain it at 30 feet or 9 meters per minute or less. If you're using a computer, pay attention and follow its messages. Maintain close contact and stay together. Remember, it's recommended to make a 3 to 5 minute safety stop at 5 meters or 15 feet after every dive. This additional stop will help you off-gas excess nitrogen. Exit according to the dive leader's instructions, but in any case, be sure to stay clear of the boat, dive platform, and any divers who are exiting. Once on board, be sure to check back in. If you're making another dive, go ahead and get ready for it, even though it'll be some time before you get in again. When you place the regulator on a new cylinder, check to make sure you haven't accidentally picked out an empty one. This doesn't happen very often on the first dive, but it may before the second, with so many empty cylinders on board. Be sure to store your equipment so that it's out of everyone's way and nothing gets lost. During your surface interval, be sure to calculate your no decompression limits for the next dive. You'll need to know your bottom time for the last dive and your planned surface interval, so remember to note both. This is another advantage of computers. They keep track of this information for you, and they help you plan additional dives based on your past dives that day. Planning is important to having fun diving. By knowing how to use basic planning tools, you can execute great dives.